Hello, I'm Food Daniel. Here are my predictions for the WFA Week 4 games. These are the games to be played on May 2nd. DC Divas and the Boston Renegades. This game ought to be as refreshing as a cold glass of water after all the blowouts last week. Boy, the WFA scores, there wasn't a single close game. This one might give us one. DC at Boston. Well, Boston's proven that new ownership, no problem. They're still winning. Still winning big. DC Divas, well, the first two games have been forfeits. And both of them were home games for the Divas, so we found ourselves in the unlikely spot of feeling sorry for the Divas because there's half their revenue gone. But they always play well against the Renegades, even though they haven't beaten the Renegades in the past couple of years. I'll say Boston, but I'll say by 3 touchdowns or less. Yes. Central Maryland Seahawks to Columbus Comets. Now the Comets are 0-2, but that's going to change. Comets will win this game. They'll beat the Seahawks, yes. Seahawks forfeited last week's game, so assuming they play. But even if they do play, Comets will win. Daytona Wave Runners, the Tampa Bay Inferno. I'm looking at the previous scores here. Okay, going by common opponent, I would say Tampa Bay is going to win this one because Tampa Bay squeaked by Miami and Miami crushed Daytona. Tampa Bay ought to win this one. I don't think it'll be that close. I'll say 4 or 5 touchdowns. And for that matter, I think Columbus's win over Central Maryland will also be by 4 or 5 touchdowns as well, yes. Okay, Atlanta Phoenix against Orlando Anarchy. That'll be a gruesome win for Atlanta, yes. St. Louis Slam at the Kansas City Titans. Ordinarily, that'd be a hell of a game because they always do play good games against each other. But after witnessing just the absolute butt crush that Kansas City experienced last week at the hands of Dallas, maybe Kansas City ain't what they used to be. I'll pick the Slam in this one by 2 or 3 touchdowns. Acadiana Zydeco at the Houston Power. This will be a good close game. I think Houston is just a little bit above Acadiana. I'll say Houston by 2 or 3 touchdowns. Austin Outlaws to Dallas Elite. Gruesome win for Dallas because that's just what they do. Arlington Impact at the South Texas Lady Crushers. Gruesome win for the Arlington Impact. The Impact are good. Okay, we have the Independent Mile High Blaze, the Tulsa Threat. I love the Tulsa Threat. I lived in Tulsa for a year. I want the Tulsa to do well in all things. But I think Mile High is good enough. They can pick up this road win. I'll say Mile High by 3 or 4 touchdowns. Utah Blitz at the Seattle Majestics. God, you gotta feel sorry for the Blitz. Last week they drove from Salt Lake City to Tacoma, got beat 62-0. Then they drive back to Salt Lake City. Now this weekend they have to drive from Salt Lake City to Seattle. That's about an 18-hour drive, 2 weekends in a row. That's just brutal. Not as brutal as a game though. This will be a gruesome win for Seattle. But by all accounts, I've heard the Blitz ladies, they're keeping their spirits up. The rookies are thrilled to be playing, and the veterans are thrilled that they have a team that's still together. So yeah, they might be losing the games, but they're not losing their spirit. That's good because as long as they don't lose their spirit, I won't lose mine. That's a promise. Okay, Portland Fighting Phillies at the Tacoma Trauma. Okay, even if you overlook last week's Tacoma victory over Utah 62-0 when Utah had only 13 players, this is still a much, much, much better Tacoma team than last year. Much better. While the Phillies got dunked by Seattle 56-6 last week, Tacoma's going to win this one by 3 or 4 touchdowns. Portland Shockwave at the Everett Rain. See, I'm losing track of what's going on in the Northwest. Let me scroll up and just take a look at what those two teams have done. Okay, in week 1, Portland beat Everett in Portland 47-20. Okay, on the road to Everett, that's only like a 4 or 5 hour drive. So There won't be too many Portland players staying behind. I'll say Portland will win this one by 2 or 3 touchdowns. Okay, and the game that I might be attending, it depends on some automotive issues I'm having. The Sin City Sun Devils at the Central Cal War Angels. Well, the War Angels are just massacring everybody this year. While the Sin City Sun Devils, they were doing just fine until last week. They got massacred by the Pacific Warriors 46-0. Based on that, I'll predict a good solid win by the War Angels by 4 or 5 touchdowns. I hope I'm wrong, though, because I want to see a good close game. And, I have plenty of friends on both the War Angels and the Sun Devils. I want to see a good game. I hope they get one. In San Diego, here's a game that will not be good. The Arizona Assassins at the San Diego Surge. Last year, these two teams played, and San Diego won 100 and something to nothing. The scoreboard was turned off, before halftime because it was getting embarrassing. Oh, gruesome. Arizona's better than they were last year, mostly because they have enough players to play a full game. But still, not against San Diego. It ain't going to happen. Instead of being 100 and something to nothing, it'll be like 80 something to nothing. Yuck. Pacific Warriors, the West Coast Lightning. That too will be gruesome. Pacific Warriors, they're back and they're better than ever, aren't they? Look at those scores, and look who they're getting their scores against. They lose to the Surge, but they still put up 31 points. They shut out the Sin City Sun Devils 46-0. This is a great Pacific Warriors team. They'll win this one gruesomely. Detroit Dark Angels, the West Michigan Mayhem. That ought to be fun. I think that ought to be a good game. How's the Dark Angels doing? Well, they lost to the Force 67-0. That means nothing. Then they lost to the Indy Crash 18-14. Okay, I can see the Mayhem winning it, and I'll say by 2 or 3 touchdowns. And finally, the Minnesota Machine versus the Indy Crash. How's Minnesota doing? Okay, they lost 70-0 to Chicago last week, but again, that's what you do in Chicago. You lose to Chicago. They lost to the Slam 27-18 in week 1. Bye week in week 2. Okay. I can see Indy winning this game. And I predict they'll win it by 1 or 2 touchdowns. I think Minnesota's going to bring a good game here. But Indy will win by 1 or 2 touchdowns. Okay, and that completes my predictions for the WFA games to be played on May 2nd. Thank you.